Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to today's DevOps.com program, brought to you by Techstrong and ConnectAll. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of Techstrong Learning, and we have an exciting program ahead. First, I have just a couple of housekeeping notes to cover. So today's session is being recorded. If you miss any of our discussion, or maybe you'd like to rewatch or share with a friend, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live session today. If you have any questions, and we really hope that you do, we want you to send those in to us using the Q&A tab, which can be found on the right side of your screen. Right next to that Q&A tab is the chat tab, and that's where we want you to get to know your fellow audience members, or maybe just let us know from where you are tuning in. And of course, before we close out today, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so make sure to stick around until the very end. So the topic of our discussion today is speed without limits, how value stream management and tool integrations help regulated industry leaders speed up software delivery. I'm joined today by Lance Knight, President and COO of ConnectAll, and Scott Garrison, Senior Vice President of Operations and Customer Success at ConnectAll. Scott, Lance, thank you both for joining me. I'm going to let you take it from here.
Thank you, Cody.
Yes. Thank you very much. And I'll go ahead and just jump in and get us started. Very excited to be here today. So thank you to DevOps.com for inviting us. The topic once again today, speed without limits, and how value stream management and tool integration will help the regulated industry speed up their software delivery. Is going to be a very interesting topic today. We're going to talk about some of the things that anybody who's heard us in any of the other webinars that we talk about quite often when it comes to value stream management, automation, et cetera. But today we do have a different twist on it, a surprise that will focus on an area that we haven't talked about as much, that in regulated industries is a very important factor in implementing the processes around DevOps, Agile, ITIL, CI/CD, et cetera. And we'll get into that in just a second. But first, I want to share a little bit of shock and awe with your audience, because what we're going to talk about today has to do around transformation and the challenges and the pitfalls and the overall fallacy around many different types of transformation, specifically when we look at digital transformation. There's a common misconception that when we go through a digital transformation that we're going to increase our time to value and improve quality. Often that is not the case. Often we see where we decrease, or we end up having longer software cycles, and we end up from a quality perspective not addressing, burning down our backlog. And if you look at some of the reports coming from the big consultants, 70 to 95% of transformations fail within software companies. And we're going to talk about why that is the case. And there's many different reasons why. But in our experience, in the value stream management world, some of the things that we find that are common are really having to do with disparate and disconnected tools and resources. A lack of automation is a big part of it. And we're going to dive into that a little bit deeper, because there's specific areas of automation that people don't even think about. And then there's slow decision-making processes, bureaucracy and lack of transparency that leads to the slowdown of software delivery. And it also, from a quality perspective, it impacts it. And the components that we're going to talk about today, and the piece that I alluded to before that we haven't spoken about, is around compliance and governance. And the reason why we want to focus on that is specifically in regulated industries, when they're going through these transformations, compliance and governance is an afterthought, which is dangerous, because it is the compliance and governance that overarches everything and needs to transform, whether you're doing a digital transformation, whether it's a DevOps transformation, data transformation, et cetera. You can't forget about compliance and governance. And the impacts are huge when organizations don't focus on this. When you look at the things like market pressures, security threats, legal obligations, et cetera, if you're undergoing a transformation in your organization and you're not taking these things into consideration and how you're going to deal with those, all you're doing is impacting your time, your quality, and your risk, and that all equals exposure. If anybody were to argue that, got some good examples of top tier organizations that have gone through transformations and implemented good processes, but they did not bring the compliance and the governance along with it. I'm sure many of you are aware with the Target data breach, which we'll actually talk about in a moment. If we look at the government and their development of the F-35 fighter jet, the cost overruns and the impacts that they had because of lack of governance, lack of compliance, or lack of transformation of those things, it's billions of dollars in cost overruns. If you look at the data, the Equifax data breach of 2017, over 147.9 million people in the U.S. were exposed in one way or another. So now we're going to take a look at the Target data breach and look at the anatomy around it and the consequences that came from it. And this is going to kind of set up, it will set up the conversation around some of the clients that we worked with and how they combat this through value stream management. Target in 2013, for those who aren't aware, they were attacked. And when they were, it was a hacker that actually had phished a third-party contractor. What they were able to do by phishing that third-party contractor, they were able to get their credentials and actually access the Target network. And through one of the terminals, they were able to tunnel through and exploit a vulnerability, an actual Windows vulnerability on a POS terminal in a retail outlet. So from going in through Target corporate, they were able to get to an actual retail store, of which they were able to scrape 40 million card accounts. And those were debit and credit card accounts, as well as 70 million email addresses. And if you look, and what's very interesting about this diagram and this anatomy that was pulled together, this attacker sat down and actually built out their value stream of how they were going to actually pull this off. And they did it within Target's operations. But the thing that happened here, there's multiple points within Target's value streams where they broke down, even in the pre-delivery process. How did they not detect a Windows vulnerability before they actually allowed that image to go into a retail outlet? And we're going to talk about what some of our clients do to actually help to mitigate that. Now, before we jump in, one of the things I want to share with the audience, and this is something, and this is a core tenet to governance and compliance, is Edward Deming's quote. Many people probably heard this before, but we live by this. In God we trust, all others bring data, because it is the data when you're implementing governance and compliance processes that is the key, that data, and being able to make decisions as far as what your next steps are in your software delivery process, or whether you need to take action based off of things that have been exposed or have variances, et cetera. Now, before we jump in to how you can combat this and how you can implement compliance and governance in your software delivery stream, there needs to be an understanding of what compliance and governance is. A lot of people have different definitions around it, but compliance is a state of being. It's a state of being that encompasses many different things, such as industry regulations, governments, legislation, et cetera. So it's a state of being within the parameters that have been dictated either by yourself or by outside entities, and things that you do to be compliant, such as doing audits, processes, setting up automated processes that provide information back that proves that you're in compliance with these specific rules and regulations. Governance is the overarching entity with that takes in compliance, as well as ethics, risk management, et cetera. Governance is manifested in many different forms, whether that be a governance review board, whether it be a change control board, whether it be certain steps within a process to where you stop at a gate and look at everything holistically before you move to the next gate. And it's these two things that our clients and many people, specifically in the regulated industry, have come to realize that when looking at value stream management, they have to include this as well. Now, the mission statement to be able to build in governance, to build in compliance, is that we need to improve our time to value and quality of services and products while ensuring data continuity across all systems to reduce risk and exposure. That is a mission statement of our clients. That is a mission statement of our organization. And it is this principle that we use when we look at helping our clients with their value streams and being able to build their governance and compliance processes over the top of it. Now, some examples of some of the leaders in regulated industries, leaders that we've actually worked with, span across infrastructure, insurance, automotive, and energy. In the insurance sector, for example, we've worked with an $8 billion holding company that has implemented value stream management for traceability, but also automating workflows around governance and compliance so they can track their metrics real time and look at places where they're exposed, as well as improvements across development, testing, support, et cetera. Another good example is in the energy sector, where we have a $40 billion Fortune 500 company in natural gas and oil that's trying to align their business, that's trying to align their execution to their business goals, and being able to measure, once again, real time, how the business is performing against those actual goals. And as I move forward of how we have actually helped solve this, I'm going to pause for a moment and see if Lance wants to jump in and add anything here.
Yeah. So, when you think about what we're doing for these companies and you think about governance and compliance relevant to, value stream management, really, we're talking about understanding, seeing how information flows, and, fundamentally understanding the human factor, and then trying to figure out how to automate that relevant to improving flow. So, with one of those companies that we were talking about, I believe they had a bottleneck between communicating things that are going on in their SAP and then over to Jira. So simply by a simple synchronization automation, we were able to help them be more compliant. When you look across the silos of software development delivery and all these companies, what tends to happen from there is connection and communication starts to break down, making auditability, making understanding when things can flow and so on to be slower and take a long time just to do an audit, right? So, you brought up this whole slide about connect all and see, measure, automate. So that's what this is all about. It's about being able to see where compliance and regulation needs to be, measure it, and then figure out how to automate from there. And this isn't just ConnectAll's platform, but this is just in general you can use. And Scott and I have a long history of working in manufacturing, so on, where you can use value stream management principles, lean principles, to look at your value stream and understand how you can remove waste. Now, I say this quite a bit, and I know, Scott, you wanted me to be the one to say this to see if there's feedback. Governance and compliance in software development delivery or anything else are and is non-value added activities. However, it is necessary. It's something you have to do. So the trick here to be more effective is how to automate that. how do you remove the human factor so it just happens, right? And Scott's bringing up this slide here. This slide kind of talks about the different types of automations you can think about doing when you're mapping your value stream, right? So I can be compliant by setting up a synchronization between two tools. I can be compliant by monitoring something that's happening. Also with triggering and data collection. At ConnectAll, we believe in three kind of things when it comes to value stream management, right? Those three things are improve flow, be data driven, and help organizations deliver value. All of these allow you to do that. And when you're looking into your value stream, you'll see where your bottlenecks are. And the goal here is to reduce the time it takes to do those non-value added activities, right? And be able to look at it from an exception perspective too. So those are coming from your analytics and metrics and so on. So there's some really interesting kind of things when you start to look at how can I improve flow. And most of the time, organizations are looking at it from, just making communication better. But what about governance and compliance? How do we shorten that time?
Right.
Your customer doesn't really care if you're in governance or if you're in compliant. They assume you are, and you need to go ahead and reduce that time. And removing the human factor of governance should be a goal when you're sitting in there trying to map your value stream and do value stream management. Now you can do that with tools or solutions. Look at your human processes as well. How many VSM sessions have, over these years, Scott, how many value stream mapping sessions have we held where you realize that the biggest bottleneck is we've got to wait for somebody to approve that, or we've got to wait for somebody to validate that somebody did do a code review,
right?
Or somebody did do a scan.
Yeah, and a lot of times in that waiting, things slip through the cracks, right? So if we go back to the target scenario and we look at these four foundations of automation, if we look at that target scenario once again, we can speculate that they built an image for their point of sale terminal, and they have this process for how they deploy those images. And there's probably many different tools that were disconnected in how they built the image and how they checked the image into their file storage, and then how QA deployed that image and tested it, et cetera. So synchronizing is that first piece to be able to do that. And now we look at triggering, right? What happened to target? There was a vulnerability. And so once this image was created and once something happened with that image, such as it was checked into a file server, were there any scans done on it? How do you automate those scans to where they trigger to come in and see if there are any vulnerabilities? Or if you're getting technical bulletins back from, Windows, how are you automating that into your image process that Windows has identified a vulnerability? Because it may have already been known, but somebody just moved through the process without the checks and balances. And that's where the monitoring piece comes in, right? Because if we're not monitoring everything that's happening, then there's no way to raise visibility to that, and to take what those outcomes are and to store them and to collect them from a data perspective, regardless if it's an audit or regardless if I have to go into a control board to present the outputs. Right. Now, the thing that we're trying to talk about here, that we'll get to examples in a minute, we're trying to shrink that process, that governance, that compliance and governance process, because anybody that goes through it knows how bureaucratic it can be. It's takes a lot of time because you got to pull data from all these different areas, and especially when you're looking at an initiative, you got a program manager that's building out this laborious governance report that they got to go present, and 9 times out of 10 the data on it is wrong because it's old stale data. It's not real time. It's just stuff that they're collecting, and that's where these 4 foundations to automation come into play.
I like that word laborious, but it's not that we're trying to shrink governance. We're trying to shrink the time it takes to do the governance, right? Governance is important. If there are reasons for it. And it's really just how long does it take to get through that? And most of the time, it's not the exceptions that are the problem. It's getting through the things that are of the normal state. So if you can automate some of these in your value stream, you can be more effective and more efficient at pushing code to deployment and getting to the customers and delivering more value and doing all those other things. And it becomes less laborious when you're using a machine or what our friend John would say is something to automate that, right? But it all starts with this one thing, and it's you don't know where you can automate until you use lean principles, look at the theory of constraints, map your value stream, find areas where you can remove waste or reduce the time it takes to do waste if it's necessary. And then you can use all different types of value stream management platforms or other platforms to help you do that. Of course, ConnectAll does do that. But our goal here is to educate more on using value stream management principles to know where you can remove that waste and then get a platform to help you do that.
That's great. Tee up to our next slide, which is automating, right? That's what we're really talking about. And that is so when we boil it down and we look at, where we kick this presentation off, automation of your entire software delivery is the point here. We're focusing specifically on the governance and compliance piece, right? Because I think many people have heard the story about connecting your tools, et cetera, et cetera. This is something that not enough people are talking about. Goes back to how I started the presentation, that when we're making our transformations, we're not taking governance and compliance into consideration. Those processes are antiquated, they're old, they are very manual. And the key is to automate once again, and to take your compliance and governance and integrate it into your value stream. Make it something that's real time. Make it something that it's not on a cadence to where every quarter I'm going through a management review board, or I have to go submit a ticket to my change control board in my ITIL organization to get approval to actually release software. It's because of those cadences and the inability to make that a real-time activity that runs in concert with our process delivery our software delivery, that things fall between the cracks and fall down. So there's two things here that we've introduced to our clients, not from a product perspective, but from a philosophical perspective, and that's the concept of governance and compliance loops.
Well, that is from the product perspective too.
Okay.
We do have a product. I'm sorry.
Touche. well, with that, I mean, and Lance, I know this is something that's near and dear to you on the governance and compliance loops. Why don't you touch on that a little bit?
I don't know if it's near and dear, but I know that there's an efficiency there. I know that there's a return on investment for implementing these things, so that you don't have so much human overhead trying to make sure these things are correct, right? And in a governance loop inside of what we're thinking, that is that it's a way for a system to look at itself and determine whether that's in governance, right? Or the way for, it's a way so that I guess I would call self-automation between the tool, right? Where I'm going to automate what's going on inside a solution to make sure that they're following different protocols, right? Make sure that no PIP data, I know I didn't say that acronym right, is in there. Make sure PII, right? Data is in there. Make sure that the requirement is well formed, right? Because we can integrate with solutions and then set up a loop to make sure that it's well formed and write back or do those things. And it can also stop flow from happening. So if it's not in compliance, it won't move to Jira where you want the developers to work on it. So it's kind of like regulating in your value stream by a bunch of different ways. And that helps with removing the human factor of compliance and governance, right? Can't move forward to your next stage in your Kanban until the system knows that you've completed a design document and all of these things. So as you look at a governance model, all of those things have to go through. And a lot of times what happens in software development delivery, a lot of those things that have to happen are in different solutions.
Right.
So somebody has to go into ServiceNow like here, look at that, Then I have to go check and make sure in whatever system that I have all the right documents. Then I can click a button, and then it could probably synchronize over. But why not have the system make sure all those things happen? At the other side of that, I'm running to go to a build. So I've checked my code in. Well, a value stream management system should be able to see that, make sure that all the things have happened in the other systems. For example, a code review, right? Has a code review happened in the status that you have put into Atlassian products? If it hasn't, then don't send it to Jenkins to get built. These are the types of things that allow you to enforce some regulation. Has a security scan happened on that code yet? Has it been scanned for, sonar? There's different scanning tools that do all this stuff. And a lot of times it's put into your compliance that you do these things. To be a certain level of CMMI, if you remember that CMMI, Scott, you have to ensure certain things, right? Certain standards, you've built in all the stuff. So here, with any system, you should be able to automate some of that so it doesn't become so arduous, as you said earlier today, Scott. And it's really interesting as you start to decompose all the value streams we mapped over these years. You see a lot of these steps and processes that are human, and they're all about compliance or regulation or so on. And being able to automate those things is going to improve flow.
Yep. And one thing I want to add to that, and specifically to the DevOps listeners out there today, because that's one audience that's already doing some of this and already understands this. I mean, the whole build, deploy, run concept is based on automation and trying to streamline things, et cetera. But the challenge still, even in DevOps organizations that are doing that, is and Lance pointed to it, are they're in different tools. So you have different tools that are firing and doing their specific thing in the value stream. And once again, they're not all connected. And that's the important piece to this last thing that's on this slide that Lance had pointed out around logic gates, which basically aggregates everything that's happening within your DevOps world. And you can build with logic gates and for the sake of being redundant, the logic into your process to be based off of certain variables and certain criteria being hit, so that these 5 checks have to happen before I actually move something from A to B, whether that's code into a build or build into a release or release into deployed into an actual test environment or test into a production environment. You can literally build those logic gates across all your different tools and aggregate that holistically. Because if those tools are doing all these things separately, they may be accomplishing the tools goals, but they're not allowing you the ability. Once again, if I go back to those 4 things on automation, they're not allowing you the ability to monitor everything and aggregate everything as needed.
Well, that's, it's like, imagine this world. So it's more than just your DevOps tools though, too, right? So it's like,
exactly,
I get these scans, but all right, has the business approved this all moving forward? If that's part of your governance, right? Is this server where I'm going to move it forward to, if that's part of the loop, is that server up in AWS? It's virtually looking at anything that you want to do in order to support your flow and the governance you have in place. And then you can put in logic around to having that happen. And that way you can even stop a release from happening if something doesn't pass the security scan.
Right.
You can even come back from a monitoring loop into one of these, and then you can actually maybe set it up to roll it back. There's so many things you can do when you start talking about logic gates. It's, that's really interesting thing that we've come out with that I'm really excited about. That is near and dear to my heart, this one, Scott. And it's really, it interjects Boolean type logic into your flow. And it opens up this whole new kind of thing that you can do. But I really want to get back to talking about the advantages of using just value stream management principles and so on, and how you can get started with this stuff. So And it's not just, this is some connect all capability. And I know it's logical in our side of things, but we really want to help organizations be more efficient with just using value stream management principles. I remember the first time we did this, which was over 10 years ago now, when we laid out a whole program to look at the flow of work in software development. We called it software lifecycle integration, wasn't it? That was what it was back then, Scott?
Yep. SLI patterns.
Same thing we're talking about today, just with the value stream on top of it. So how do you get started is where I'm leading you to start talking about that.
Yeah. So let me close out on the benefits of automating compliance and governance. I mean, our topic today was how to speed up software delivery. This was a really micro-focused area of how to speed up your software delivery. There's many areas within value stream and getting started with value stream that'll help you speed up your software delivery other than compliance and governance. We just decided to take a focus on this because not enough people are talking about it. This is very big. Once again, I'm going to go back and I'm going to reiterate. Companies go through transformations all the time, and I've been part of them and I've led them. And I can tell you from my own experience, compliance and governance is always the last thing that's looked at, and very rarely does it ever change. So benefits of bringing compliance and governance into your value stream allows you to be able to automate your security controls in every step of software delivery. You now will be able to centralize and capture evidentiary compliance data. And think about that for a minute. Centralizing evidentiary compliance data. Go back to my scenario where you're having to go to all these different tools and you have to fill out forms and triplicate, et cetera. No longer. If you automate every compliance event, you can centralize the results. Additionally, real-time audit trails. Think about that as well. Being able to look and see if you're in compliance real time from your audit trails. And then it eases the burden of governance reporting, right? And this isn't just around compliance. You have governance over your agile process. You have governance over your customer success processes, your support processes, et cetera. Being able to ease that burden of that reporting is huge. And then the last piece, and this is specific to compliance and governance, is exposing bottlenecks and risks for immediate mitigation, right? It's, once again, if we go back and we talk about those governance loops and as well as those the logic gates, you're going to escalate immediately when there's a variance. And that way you can mitigate immediately instead of, once again, having to wait to go to the control board and to present this information, et cetera, and make decisions on it. Those decisions can now be real time. And that's the conclusion of our discussion.
Well, it all starts with mapping your value stream, right?
Yep.
And so what you have to do is first, to get going and understanding this, is map your value stream, map the human processes as well as the technical processes so that you can understand what's going on. And then you can take another dive down to each one of those sections in your value stream, possibly look at it and say, okay, why is there a bottleneck here? And then you can do a SIPOC. I say that word all the time, but you can look it up. It's supplier input, whatever, customer output. And you can look at the process in the middle and you can see that there's compliance and governance in there that you can automate in your value stream. If anybody wants to know or wants access to a solution where they can map their value stream, go to valuestreammanagement.com. Connect offers a complimentary free value stream mapping solution with all the icons and tools so that you can get started. We're all about helping the community be more efficient at lean principles and value stream management principles, as well as helping organizations actually remove that waste and be more efficient. So, Cody, back to you as Scott's looking at the screen. Do we have any questions or anybody have any great answers for us? I'd like some answers.
Well, we do have a question right here. It says, how do you address change requests that could drastically affect the scope of the project, i.e. measures to guard accidentally automating increased scope?
Yes. We deal with that quite often. That's a very common use case. And change requests come in many different forms, right? So I'll use the example of a feature request, that's coming in from a customer, and we have our release train that's moving forward. To the point here, how do I keep that from coming in? Or even more so, how do I get that into my release train? How do I prioritize and say, this is something that we do need to look at? And it all comes down to being able to measure the impact, as well as measure the benefit. If the benefit is more than the impact, right? It's if all of a sudden I have a potential customer that's going to generate, net revenue of $5 million, that benefit may outweigh the impact of increasing my software delivery time and possibly impacting quality. So this specific use case, we build these gates in for our clients. And on one of the slides I showed our insurance client, this is one of the things that they've actually done. And they do it real time, and they set their variables into play. And those variables, they map it out to the Gartner Magic Quadrant, right? That upper right-hand corner being the sweet spot. And that's so all these change requests can come in and they can be monitored, real time, maybe a little too much for change requests, but, at least weekly. Many organizations that I've worked in, they look at, they're very haphazard when it comes to reviewing change requests. But we can take everything that's incoming, we can put it into our Magic Quadrant, we can put our variables in, to be able to determine, cost versus, time, or impact versus benefit. We can adjust those variables for our customers and then make the decisions based off of that. So nothing gets through until that is reviewed. And then going back to, the logic gates, then if it meets the criteria, it can either be an automated, let's put it into a backlog, let's take it out of the product backlog, put it into the development backlog, or it could be the manual, where it has to be approved by a board, and then somebody presses a button, says it goes in. So there's multiple ways to actually handle that. I hope that answers the question for who asked that, for participant 565. Lance, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, it's really about automating the communication around it, right? Because a lot of times change requests comes from other systems, and they got to get into other systems. Those requests never really get to development where they can actually think about what that impact would be. And then the next thing you know, that's getting pushed down them. So it's really about automating the approval process and the automation of having it communicate through. And it can't be put into a backlog till it's approved, or those types of things. And just removing just that time is a return on investment for organizations, right? Just removing the time of collaboration on it, where, oh, well, it's in an email, or it's here. Here we can centralize it. And then you can also, like Scott was saying, report on it. How many change requests did come into this? No wonder why our velocity is slow. What can we do better at the front side of it to gathering requirements? So it's data driven. It's creating that ability just to remove the time from what I call the swivel chair effect, right? Somebody's got to take that from this system, then put in this system. Well, it can automatically happen across those systems, allowing real-time collaboration. And I think that's exactly what you said, Scott, but in my words.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Our next question reads, a tool like Azure DevOps, which we use, including boards, test plans, roadmap, etc., how can ConnectAll still be able to provide value or trying to understand the gaps?
Well, it's interesting. So if you have a solution that's an all-in-one like Azure DevOps, supposedly, there are still scanning tools out there. There are still tools that are not connected to Azure DevOps. And that's where we come into play, right? So even at the point of moving things from, let's say, from code to test, there's regulation in there. And you can do a loop into those regulations and don't let it move. So that's some of the places that we can provide value. A lot of times Azure DevOps, there's also organizations that have Atlassian products. Those have to communicate. Even all the way to the other end where you're monitoring where you're monitoring code in production, when you're looking at scanning tools like Zabbix and all these other ones, the results of those things have to get back into your backlog to get worked on. Those are feedback loops, and we call them monitoring connections. So there's so many things that still have to get into your backlog that you understand that are going on in your total value stream. And that's where Connect All and value stream management solutions can bridge the gap of more real-time communication. One of the scenarios Scott talked about was something happened in production. Well, you need to amplify feedback loops from your scanning tools, and those have to happen rapidly and be fixed rapidly. Let's say something uncovers a vulnerability. We use, I forget what tool we use. I'm saying Zabbix, but we have Zabbix to monitor all of our situations. That here at Connect All feeds right back into our operations loop, operations board, and they execute on it. That's the same with something that has a code issue or a security issue before you even move it to production. So I know that, Azure DevOps handles all of these things, but it doesn't do the scanning. It doesn't have, some of it does have in there. So there's some tools in there, but all those other tools you're using to ensure security, to ensure whatever, need to come back to Azure DevOps for you to be more effective. A lot of times, even when you think about Azure DevOps, which is a great solution, there's always another PPM tool on top of that. There's always another planning tool on top of that. And what's interesting when we think about that, I learned years ago, it's interesting learning, right? So when Scott and I started working together, I worked for a requirements company, and we would help organizations be better formed around the requirements. And then we had integration to take requirements from our tool into Jira. But what I realized, there was more value than that, because a lot of requirements in software development happens in their tools and never makes it back up to product planning. So with an integration and connection and removing that, you can actually stay more uncompliant, because you got to understand it at the top level as well. So you'll be able to prioritize these things against your business themes, because the requirements and user stories that get broken down are going back up also. There's all kinds of places when you have an end-to-end tool where a product like Connect All can fill in all kinds of gaps to make you more efficient. I know it seems good to have one end-to-end tool, but they're just not out there.
Well, I'm going to give another example, because you hinted to it. You brought it up to another level. My life has been spent on the services and operations side, customer facing, whether it's support, whether it's professional services, et cetera. And organizations that I've worked in that have used Azure DevOps, and they've used it for all their development and testing, et cetera. The thing that gets lost is there are individual things in that backlog that development's working on that impact different customers or different projects or different initiatives. And being able to have visibility, from a customer facing perspective or from a financial perspective, that's another layer that sits on top of this. How does that one feature impact all of my ARR and all of my non-recurring revenue for customer services engagements, right? I may have a feature sitting in development's backlog, and they have no visibility. The development team has no visibility into how important that feature is. And I have no visibility in how it's impacting my delivery to my clients from whatever initiative that I'm contracted to. So that's where you can pull Connect All in a scenario where you have one all-inclusive tool, because that tool's still in a silo. It's still in the development world. There's other people relying on development. Now that makes assumptions. It makes a lot of assumptions, that this is a scenario where I have customers that are waiting on things, et cetera. But that would be another good example where we can start to integrate and then understand the costs. What are the cost impacts of everything that's in the backlog? Because I guarantee you, it's not one specific thing. It's everything in that backlog has different impacts on our business and our revenue and our profits, et cetera.
All right, Scott and Lance.
It's taking a while to answer all these questions. We're doing good at saying a lot about it. But any other questions? Sorry.
No, I'm not seeing any more questions at this moment. So to our audience members, please do send any questions that you have. I'm going to quickly just give away a couple of gift cards while we wait for any more.
Great.
So these are for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. Our first winner is Emily S. Our second winner is Tanya Q. Our third winner is Paul C. And our third winner is Shiv G. So to our 4 winners, congratulations. Please keep an eye on your email inbox to claim that gift card. But if you don't happen to see that email, check your spam folder. And I'll also remind everyone that this session was recorded. So following this program, you should receive an email with a link to access this recording on demand.
I never win. I do these all the time. I've never won one yet.
It's a random drawing, Lance.
Oh, maybe I don't qualify because I'm a presenter, but
I'll put you in on the next one.
Cool. I'll attend the next one. That way, maybe I'll win.
Awesome. Well, guys, I'm not seeing any more questions. So I'll yield the floor to you again if you have anything you want to leave with our audience before we close up.
Scott?
Thanks. Thank you for having us, Cody. Thank you for everybody that attended today. And I'll just reiterate that think about it. Governance and compliance. It's the last thing. And if you can bring that into your value stream, you will definitely see the benefits to your delivery processes.
Yeah. And I think when you're mapping your value stream, ask why. Be inquisitive, right? So why do we do it that way? Can we make that better? There's there's so many stories I have from my time in manufacturing where something was part of a corrective action that was 40 years old. And, you had computers to replace it, but yet they were still doing it the old way. Well, we can't change that. Corrective action. 40 years ago, seriously, 40 years ago. I worked in metal foundry, turbine blades. And, some of those machines were older than me twice over, but they wouldn't let go of these things. But when I started asking why, we were able to get more efficient. So ask why. And there you go. That's all I got. Now, if Scott was truly sarcastic, he said, well, why, Lance? But
I was thinking of an old commercial. Why ask why? Drink Bud Dry? Was that what it was?
I don't know. And then lastly, thanks everybody for attending. Hopefully this content was useful for you. And feel free to map your value stream at valuestreammanagement.com.
Awesome. Lance, Scott, thank you both so much for joining me today. I'd like to thank ConnectAll for sponsoring today's program. And to our audience, thank you so much for spending time with us. We do ask for just 1 extra minute of your time for a survey that will pop up on your screen as soon as we close. But otherwise, you are free to go, and we hope to see you again at an upcoming Techstrong Learning program. Have a great rest of your day. Lance, Scott, thank you.
Thank you.